Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit here about supplies. I want to do this on a video ahead of time so that we don't waste precious, well not waste, but we don't take up precious time during the lessons covering all these basics and these details here. I want you to get 2 sturdy cups for water. I like these flat bottom glass bowls because they don't tip. Easy release tape. This is just painter's tape. It says clean release. You can find it at just about anywhere. I got this from Walmart. There are fancier tapes to use, but this will work just fine. Masking tape will work in a pinch, but this will do less damage to your paper. Pieces of paper towel, you'll want to have a bunch handy, and the softer and more absorbent, the better. All right. So the nicer things work better than the really cheap papery type. A pencil and an eraser. If you have a white eraser or a kneaded eraser like this thing here, that would be ideal. Not necessary though. So you need 2 to 3 round brushes in various sizes, and then one, I recommend 1/2 inch flat brush, and that will do. Watercolor paints, we'll talk more about that in a minute. Watercolor paper, and then you can just tape directly to your board, but ideally if you could find a clipboard, or in a pinch, if you don't have a clipboard, you can just take the back cardboard piece off of the watercolor pad, or use an old book, because you are going to want to tape down the watercolor paper to keep it flat, and that will prevent the warping and buckling. The reason I like to tape things down to a board that I can move is because there are techniques where we will want to lift it and let the colors blend together, and you can't do that if it's on the table. And then sometimes I will actually completely turn things upside down and paint in order to get to a little tight area or at a certain angle, and also to avoid having my hand resting on a more delicate spot in the painting. So yes, sometimes I will be painting or drawing upside down. Out of the way. Crayola watercolors, I would say don't even bother. Okay, if you absolutely can't find anything else, then we'll work with it, but these are a mess and really just for 4-year-olds. Not to be confused with the Prang watercolors that I recommended. Yes, they look very similar, okay, but they are absolutely not the same thing. These are Prang semi-moist, and I use these a lot in the classroom with students. And my only complaint with them for beginners and for students is that you cannot get really rich, vibrant colors. Everything is going to be a little more muted with them, which is okay, but can be a little frustrating. Both of these paintings here were done with the Prang watercolor set because I was on vacation and I wanted to get everything done for prepping for this class, and I wanted the challenge of, can I make a decent painting or even a good painting out of this? You can see this turned out well, I think, but the colors are very muted. They're very dull. And that was my best attempt to get those oranges and those blues as vibrant really as I could without going too heavy with the paint, which is not the intent of watercolor. You want that translucency. You want to be able to see through it and see the paper shining through. So we are going to struggle to get vibrant, rich colors with this palette, but you can see it's possible. I did this painting as a practice as well with these paints. You can take a photograph of these, which is what I did, and then I altered them in Photoshop to get the vibrant colors the way I wanted. You can also do that to fix little mistakes. So I did not like how these trees turned out, their intensity, their color, their shape. I didn't like anything about them, and so I was able to tweak and adjust them in Photoshop a bit and mute them a little more so that they weren't so distracting, because I liked everything else about the painting. All right, so you can do that these days, and that is perfectly fine. Same thing with the turtle. We put it in Photoshop, and then we just popped the orange a little bit more and just tried to sort of make it just a little bit more vibrant, which is the goal I had in mind, but didn't quite come through while using Prang. I did buy myself the 16 pan, because it'll give, if I am using them, it gives you more variety, because it's hard to mix all the colors you might want from just these here. If I'm painting with these during class though, I'm going to use the ones that match the 8 set, okay, because a lot of you guys might only have this one. These also are cool that if you run out of a certain color, they can pop out and you can get replacements of just the color that you need. All right, moving on. Now, the nice stuff. Oh no, nope, not the nice stuff. We gotta talk about Reeves first. Okay, this is what I've been painting with for the last 15 years. They are not fancy at all, but you do get more vibrant, nice pigmentation out of these. Oh, these aren't even open, this is brand new. I use these in the classroom for my high school students. I use praying these with the middle schoolers and elementary students. I prefer this as a student grade watercolor. I recommend Winsor & Newton. That's my favorite brand, and these are the ones I used in college. They come in tubes. These are the larger tubes. They do come in skinnier, smaller tubes as well, and again, went on. Another brand people like, and I've used before because I have a few apparently, but I'm not real partial to them, is Grumbacher. I don't remember why I don't like them as much, but I know they're kind of a comparison to Winsor & Newton, but I like Winsor & Newton. All right, most nicer watercolor brands will come in two types, liquid in these little tubes, or dried out and in these pans. These are half pans. Full pans would take up the whole little size. These things snap out and you can put a full-size pan in there, or these little half pans are very popular. This is a travel set where you can clip little pieces of watercolor paper here if you like, or actually use that as a mixing palette. This pops out here, and you got more mixing space, and then you can either use this and paint on something else, or snap this back in there and do little field sketches, which is a lot of fun. All right, types of palettes here. All you have to have is a paper plate. However, beginners especially can get frustrated by mixing up the color and it's spreading and bleeding and blending into other colors if you're not used to using a flat palette. So you may want to invest in, well, it's $1. It's not much of an investment. You can find these at the craft store in various types and forms for $1 or $2. And I really like this one here because it's got the areas where you can mix colors on a flat area, but then also has the wells that can collect more pigment when you're trying to mix a color that you're going to be using a lot of. All right, so again, personal preference. Any of these things will do. Now, if you want to get fancy, I'll show you this one first. All right, this is the palette I use most often at home here. It looks this clean and neat because I just washed the whole thing and reloaded it with my nicer paints. So these are my paints that I put in here from the ones we bought 15, 20 years ago. All right, I used these for a whole college class, and then I've used them a couple times since, and then I just squirt them out to create 2 full palettes, and I still have some left over. So they do last. So that, you know, $10 to $20 a little tube, it does go far, okay, because these are highly concentrated and the water will reactivate them. And so now I'm still waiting for these to dry out. I put them in this palette 2 days ago, and some are dry and some I can still feel they're still liquid on the inside. You want, if you go this direction, you want to let these sit and air dry, okay? What you don't want to do is close them up and let them dry with a seal, or even, this one doesn't seal completely, but they'll get really funky, they'll start to smell, bad things will happen. You don't want that. So you do have to let them completely dry out before you seal it up. All right, and then your palette will look all messy. When it gets too messy, you just run it under the water and you just avoid getting water on this area, and you just wipe those out and they'll be fine. So I like this one a lot. Even got these things where you can hold your brushes right there. You can, if you want to stand or hold the paints close to what you're doing. It's got the little thumb hole here. And I prefer to mix my colors on a flat surface, so that's why I like those big open spaces. But then I left some of these wells open as well, so if I need to mix a whole lot of one color, I will create a whole puddle within that. What I don't like about this is it is not airtight. So when you close this, you see liquid would come out. Okay, so if I needed to quickly pack this up and go somewhere and turn it sideways, it would make a mess. So I use these only at home or in the classroom, and I will let it dry before I close it up. Now I just got this little fancier thing, and again it looks nice and neat and clean because it hasn't been used yet. I've got my same palette arranged. Oh, and I should mention why these are empty. Those were colors I use a lot of, and for whatever reason I'm completely out of the tubes, and so either they got lost or I used them all up, and so I'm waiting for those to arrive and I will add more to them. This one is airtight, okay, so it will have a nice seal and nothing's going to drip out of that, so that's awesome. It doesn't have quite the same amount of mixing space, except for, it actually kind of does, it's hidden. So this pops out and you can mix on a clear thing like this, or lay it on top of the paper that you're working with so you can see how it's going to look right next to what you're doing. I don't typically like the clear as much, so I will keep it on here and paint right on there so I can see the white paper through there. Or you can actually just remove this and you have this whole big nice white space to mix your paints as well. I did this because I saw a lot of artists doing this, thought this was pretty brilliant. It's hard to remember sometimes what these colors look like when they're on paper, and so making a little key like this, once you are comfortable with your colors and you know which ones you like, these are all my favorites that I keep in my palette, and so I painted them on here from really dark to super light and thinned out, and that way I have a constant reference, remember what colors it is I like that I need to get replaced when they run out, and I can have a quick reference here to see what they look like on the paper. One more note about creating a permanent palette. If you create a permanent palette using the Reeves, when they dry, they will tend to crack and peel a little bit more, okay? And so if you have leftover paint laying in here or little pieces that have sort of come off to the sides, when they dry, it will get flaky. And then when you open this up, little pieces will scatter, potentially. It doesn't always happen, but then they can contaminate the other colors. So if doing a permanent palette, I recommend that you use the higher quality watercolors that will not do that. Reeves is so inexpensive that I always tell my students, you don't have to worry about using up the whole tube because this entire thing costs $5. So don't feel guilty about replacing it, and there's multiple places online and multiple craft stores you can run and get these real quick. So yeah, I think that's all I need to say about that. Just these will tend to flake and peel when they're sitting dry, and these will not do that. Now to talk about papers. If you're going to splurge on anything, well, I hate to call it splurging. Okay, if you're going to invest in anything, go with the nicer papers first. That will change the results of what you're getting from the cheaper materials of the brushes and the watercolors more dramatically than anything else. You can get away with okay paints or even cheap paints if you're using nicer paper. And I'll explain more a little bit when we'll do a little demo showing you what how the paints respond to the paper. There's absolutely no reason ever that you would want to use computer paper, okay? I let my children paint on this and it's pretty terrible, all right? It's not designed, computer paper, sketchbook paper is not designed to hold water at all. I like Strathmore drawing paper. I don't like Strathmore watercolor paper. But I have found it just doesn't seem to hold the watercolor as well as I would like. It warps a little bit more than the paper I'm going to recommend. It's got a rougher texture, which is not usually what I want for my work. And what else was it about it? Oh, it seems like the paper disintegrates faster. When you try to rework it and you try to do any blending techniques, the paper will start to fall apart a little faster. So I let my kids use this stuff. I do like Canson watercolor paper. Here I've got two different types of Canson. The one I'm going to recommend you guys use is very affordable. You can find these this size, the 9x12, 30 sheets of 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. This is what I use myself a lot, and it's what I use in my high school classroom. You can get pretty good results. This is the same paper here. It will blend and absorb nicely. You get a lot of control. You get some slight texture. And it's just overall decent paper to work with. Now, the gold standard. Okay, 100% cotton cold press paper by Arches. Now you can get 100% cotton paper from other companies and brands as well, but I really love Arches. Most watercolor artists that I follow and learn from myself and professors I've had preferred the Arches brand for just various reasons. Canson, about the same size. This is about 35 cents a sheet. No, I think it was even cheaper because I get it on sale. I think it came down to like 18 cents a sheet, something like that. This is $2.50 a sheet on sale. Okay, so you don't play with this. Okay, this is nice stuff. One pad of 12 sheets, is like $25 at the cheapest. I almost forgot to mention, watercolor paper types come in various types of finishes. So the Arches comes in something called hot press, cold press, and rough. This is the cold press and is the most popular, typically. Hot press has a very slick, smooth surface, so you're not going to see any of this like bumpy texture. And then rough is going to have an extremely textured surface, way bumpier than even this. As I'm looking at these, because I have been painting with Canson mostly and not Arches in a while, I am wondering if I'm going to actually like the hot press of Arches better than the cold press, because you can see, hopefully you can see on the camera, how much texture there is on the 140-pound cold press of Arches versus the same pound of paper on the Canson. And I'm used to the slicker surface, so I'm wondering if I'm actually going to like this or not, because it's been so long since I've used it routinely. So I'm going to actually buy some hot press Arches paper as well, and I'll have to experiment with both. So for this class, I will be using the Canson watercolor paper, and let me find it, the Reeves watercolor set. I purposely used the inexpensive stuff because I wanted to show students what was possible and make sure that the results that we're getting together during class are realistic. I don't think it's fair for the instructor to be painting with the really fancy, nice, expensive stuff, and then you guys are using less expensive stuff and wondering why you're not getting the same results.